Hey everyone, Pastor Freddy here coming to you midweek. I wanted to follow up with you during this new series that we just started with this sermon series called Following Jesus in the Age of Outrage. I don't have to convince you very much that we live in an age of outrage, have for quite some time now, and I picked up a book that really influenced me called Christians in the Age of Outrage by a guy named Ed Stetzer, who's a professor. He's a speaker, a writer, and just a really good influencer in the Christian world. And so we introduced this series this last week, and we talked a lot about sharing and showing the love of Jesus, and really not being like the culture and being so outraged about everything. And I gave an example of a young man who was in a court session doing an impact statement as one of the family members of his brother who was shot. You may remember the story. It was in the news quite a bit several years ago. But a young man who was going home, well, he was actually in his home, and he was sitting there not doing anything out of the ordinary, and an off-duty police officer came in, and she thought she was going to her apartment. She actually was going to his. She was going to the apartment above hers, and unfortunately everything happened the way it did, and she shot and killed this young man. The brother is in the courtroom. He's a Christian. His family is a Christian. And what we said Sunday was that what we saw in this moment was a teenager who follows Jesus, and he did what followers of Jesus do. He forgave, and he showed and shared the love of Jesus. And I just want to remind you with this clip of how he actually showed the love of Jesus in that moment.
And the best would be give your life to Christ. I'm not going to say anything else. I think giving your life to Christ would be the best thing that both of them would want you to do. Again, I love you as a person, and I don't wish anything bad on you. I don't know if this is possible, but can I give her a hug, please? Please?
Yes.
What a powerful, powerful story and a powerful example of showing the love of Jesus. We're called to share the love of Jesus, and some of us can kind of get our minds around that a little more than we can actually think about showing Jesus' love to others. But really, we're followers of Jesus, so we want to do what Jesus does, and we believe that Jesus called us, even says in His Word, that we are to be holy even as Christ is holy. It's attainable only because of God's Spirit that lives within us. And so we're just really diving into that over the next couple weeks, and I wanted to follow up with you after each sermon to touch on some of the things I mentioned, but also follow through with another thought. And this is kind of really the addendum to the message Sunday. This is the final point. And what I want you to think about, and I'll put it on the screen for you here, I want us to be known as impious Galileans. Now, that's a weird phrase, I know, but I want to explain it to you because sometimes those weird phrases stick with us. Impious Galileans. Many people think the church grew by millions of people right after Jesus resurrected and the early church began. But really the church grew the most in its early stages in kind of the 2nd century to the early mid 3rd century. And some of the reason for that is because the early church took this message and this verse that I want to share with you today out of 1 John 4:19. It says this: "We love because He first loved us." We have a reason that we love. It's because Jesus first loved us. We're not just doing this by our own will and our own power, but we're doing it by the power of God in us. And we have a scripture that tells us we love because Christ first loved us. And so the early church decided this crazy idea. We should do that. And I wonder if that would be the case for us today, that we should take this to heart. So it's 252 AD, and I've got some notes I want to share with you today. A plague hit the city of Carthage, and there was a guy by the name of Bishop Cyprian. And this bishop was during this time of this plague, and so the plague actually was called the Plague of Cyprian, not because he had it, not because he spread it, but because he recorded this section of history. And so What Cyprian decided to do is he called all the Christians to the town square, and they had been marginalized, they had been ridiculed, as you can imagine, in the stages of the early church. But he called them all together and he spoke to them. And here's what he said. He said, we need to meet. And what I want to tell you is if we're going to do what Jesus did, then I call you to give personal and financial aid and care and comfort to all people. And then catch this. He said, I want you to do that according to their need, not according to their faith. So you're saying, don't wait for them to believe like us. Let's just go ahead and minister to them and love them. I know we're marginalized. I know we're being pushed to the edges. I know nobody really likes us right now. But let's just do things according to people's needs around us. Let's meet the needs, not according to their faith. And so he said, we're going to care for the sick and the dying among us. In those days, when a plague would happen, here's what the response would be. Let's burn the place down. Let's burn everything down. And it's not just hyperbole. Like, this is like legitimately what they would do, because they believed that was the only way to get rid of a plague that was going to infect everyone and really kill the community. So here's what this bishop said. He said, that's not going to be our focus this time. We're going to do something different. We're going to be countercultural even in how we respond to a plague. And we're going to share and show the love of Jesus as ambassadors. And I'm telling you, what usually happened. It got people's attention. So then a century later, check this out. There was an emperor named Julian. He actually went by Julian the Apostate, and that was really because he was this pagan emperor. It wasn't because his mom named him that. And so Julian wanted to reverse the progress of the early Christians. They were growing now by leaps and bounds because they were serving other people. They were meeting the needs of the people, not according to their faith, but according to their need. And so he wanted to stop this progress of these Christians, and who they kept serving others, sharing and showing the love of Jesus, sharing the gospel. And it was funny because at that time there were so many pagan gods, and the instruction was you follow the pagan gods. Well, the Christians didn't do that, so they were people. They had no piety, they had no allegiance to the pagan gods. So oddly enough, in that stage of life and history, the Christians were called atheists because they didn't believe in the gods that everybody else believed in. They didn't submit to the cultural gods. They had the one true God. And so they were called impious. And the reason they were called impious Galileans by this emperor is because they were followers of Jesus. Jesus did most of his ministry in Galilee, and so he was known as Jesus the Galilean. We know him as Jesus the Nazarene because of where he was born. And so they were labeled, there wasn't a Christian label then, they were labeled as impious Galileans, people who didn't follow the gods of that day. They were followers of Jesus, and they were criticized for that. And this emperor is like, they're spreading by serving all these people. We've got to do something to these impious Galileans. And so slowing them down didn't work for this guy. So he writes to somebody, and we have it recorded what he says. He said these words: while the pagan priests, the people that work with him, neglect the poor, the hated Galileans devote themselves to works of charity. He says these impious Galileans not only feed their own poor, but they also feed ours, welcoming them into their agape. This is what he said, their love. And I just wonder, in this middle of the week, as you're just going through the things you're going through, you're thinking about all the responses and reactions you have to do to your own life. What if you're intentional about being this impious Galilean, this impious Christ follower in today's time? For those of you that go to the church that I attend, what if we were impious Living Word folks? What if we were impious Houstonians? And the world really may not like everything that we do. They won't believe everything that we believe, and that's okay. We don't have to respond with outrage. What if we just share and show the love of Jesus, and we take care of not just our own, but we take care of others? I've often heard growing up, man, we got to take care of our own, take care of our own. What if we just look at everybody as our own, and we take care of everybody according to their need, not according to their faith? Don't wait till they align with us in our faith and our politics and our personal opinions and all of that. What if we act with intention, and what if we wore the figurative t-shirts of impious Galileans? We want to serve Jesus. We want to follow Jesus. We want to share and show the love of Jesus. And Christians live and look differently on this countercultural mission of really reaching out and being something different. So I ask you today, are you a follower of Jesus who is sharing and showing the love of Christ? I hope to see you next Sunday as we continue following Jesus in the age of outrage.